Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Apologies that this lesson is remote, especially considering the significance of it. But weather doesn't always cooperate with our plans. So today we are covering over the thesis, the single most important set of sentences, either one sentence in your DBQ and one in your LEQ, or maybe two sentences in one, two sentences in the other. Either way, the most important 2 to 4 sentences that you will be writing in your time in AP. We will regularly be addressing the thesis in this class simply because it is such a hugely important piece of our course. It's absolutely massive, so we have to make sure that you guys can write a good thesis. That's what we're going to be doing today. Going to try to keep it good and short while also giving you enough information. Here's a reminder of weights, which is important because it's easy to forget how significant something like the thesis is. If you look on our chart here, which is from 2018, but these weights don't change all that much from year to year, usually in like the hundredths. Yay, a math term. If you look here, you will notice that getting a point on your DBQ is basically the equivalent of getting 5 multiple choice questions right, while getting a point on your LEQ is the equivalent of getting about 3.5 of your multiple choice questions right. As such, understanding the thesis and the points associated with it is huge. Trust me when I say, if you don't write a good thesis, you're going to lock yourself out of a lot of really high value points. In fact, if you look over here at this student in particular who got a 4 on this exam, they got it because they got 2 points on their LEQ and 4 points on their DBQ. They were able to gain those points probably because they had a good thesis. Writing a good thesis is absolutely core to writing a solid essay, and we have to talk about that. You have to be aware of that. All right, so first, and this is primarily for those of you who didn't take AP US or AP Euro if you're in that boat, we have to talk about what a thesis is. The thesis is the hub of your paper's argument. If you look up in the top corner there, you'll notice where it says the decision rules. Basically, those are the guides College Board leads to or College Board uses to lead them to, does this person get the thesis point? Does this person not get the thesis point? Critically, that's basically the same block of text for the LEQ and the DBQ. I know this is the LEQ rubric because it's smaller, it has fewer points, it fits easier as my image. But it is important to understand that the thesis itself, yeah, it's only worth 1 point. So you may be wondering, McDowell, why are we spending so much time talking about this? The answer to that question is found lower in the rubric. So check it out. Evidence point number 2. You have to support an argument. That is your thesis. Historical reasoning, analysis and reasoning, historical reasoning, blah, 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 to frame or structure an argument. That goes back to your thesis. Same thing with the complexity point, the unicorn point for those of you who are familiar with APUSH. All of it comes back to your thesis. So yeah, the thesis itself is only worth 1 point, but then 3 of the remaining 5 points are also tied to your thesis. What that means is you're literally, if you mess up a thesis, you literally have set your maximum number of points you can get in your LEQ at 2 out of 6. That's not great. 4 of the points are tied to the thesis, or 5 if you use the DBQ rubric. The thesis is basically telling your reader, hey, here's what I'm going to write about. It tells you, hey, here's what the points in my argument are going to be. It may be, blah, 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 A and B, blah, 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 A, B, C. It may be, and this is for those of you who took APUSH, blah, 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 A and B. However, C. That's fine. All of those work. But what you have to do is declare what you're going to write. I saw a decent amount of this on multiple short answer questions we gave back in quarter 1, please, please, please don't use first person pronouns. No we, no I. That's not, no us, none of that. Um, a well-written thesis is critical to scoring well, and that's why we're spending a whole day on this, whereas all these other points, whether they're on the DBQ or the LEQ, are going to be addressed more or less in a single day. We have to dwell on the thesis because without the thesis, your paper just is a hollow shell. Without an argument to support, a lot of these points cannot be gotten, and that is why this matters so, so much. Please make sure you know that. All right. This is, unlike the last one, primarily for those of you who took a PUS. If you took a push, you're probably familiar with the concept that your contextualization should come first, then your thesis, then the rest of your paper. That's great, but contextualization almost exists on an island. You can get the contextualization point by writing a really good intro paragraph and then a god-awful essay. Okay, so please keep that in mind. The thesis is the beating heart of your essay. The contextualization, which comes before it in the intro paragraph, that's more like a lesser organ. Contextualization is more like, a kidney. You should still probably have both of them, but you can live without one. We will cover contextualization, but like I said, the thesis is king. The thesis is the thing you must have in order to get all of the points you want. All right, so here's College Board's thesis explanation. College Board says that the thesis responds to a prompt with a historically defensible claim that establishes a line of reason. Jump down to my commentary on that. First of all, your point has to be historically defensible. Somebody who knows something about history, not online conspiracy theorists, they're not the ones reading your essay. Somebody who knows something of history has to be able to read your argument and say, okay, that is clearly an argument. This is not a time to express generic opinions. There is a difference between an opinion and an argument. Just because you think that Peter the Great was secretly a space alien wearing a Russian czar's skin does not mean that you should include it as your thesis. You have to be able to use facts to defend your argument. Now, those facts themselves go into the body paragraphs, but the general topics of those body paragraphs go in the thesis. That's where establishes a line of reasoning come in. Your thesis has to provide a roadmap. Your thesis needs to tell your reader, okay, this is where they're going with this. It may have 2 points. It may have 3 points. It may have 2 points for, 1 point against, but no matter what, I should be able to read this 1 to 2 sentences and know what this paper is about. If you learn nothing else today, I'm going to say that again because you have to know it. In your thesis, I should be able to read those sentences, that 1 or 2 sentences, and know what your paper is about. You do not get to just restate the prompt. We'll see what that looks like in a little bit. Because simply restating the prompt, that isn't a thesis. You just reworded something that was given to you. Like I said, you'll see what that looks like, but please don't ever do that. Oh, if you're wondering about these, whenever I first wrote this, I had recently been dinged by the county due to a copyright claim, and I figured it would be very, very funny if I just put a whole bunch of copyright symbols after College Board and AP throughout this slideshow. And even though that happened last year, I left them in because, it's still funny. That is the degree of petty I am. All right. College Board's decision rules, I'm going to let you pause the video and just look at those rather than sit here and read a whole block of text to you. But please do note the following about the decision rules. 1, don't restate the prompt. I said it before, I'll say it again. I see it a lot. It's very, very frustrating. I see it from both APUSH veterans and from people who are new at this. don't restate the prompt. You have to make an argument. The prompt itself is not going to give you enough for an argument. Point number 2, your thesis does not have to be one sentence. I've addressed this a couple of times in this class. It can be two. A lot of people who use the John Irish model, and this applies exclusively to those of you who know what that is, who took a push, or who have watched Steve Heimler's video on it, which, by the way, I recommend. Watch Heimler's Histories video on the thesis. He has some great stuff on there that I don't get to address in here. This thesis does not have to be one sentence. It can be two. So if you want to write, here's my thesis, however, blah, 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 trying to go for the complexity point, absolutely you should do that. When I took this course all the way back in, I'm not going to tell you when, it was long enough ago that several of you weren't alive. Shush. When I took this course, most of my theses were two sentences, but you shouldn't have more than two. If your thesis is like 3 sentences long, man, if you have to make one of those sentences a run-on sentence, do it, because we ain't English. For my class, please, 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 I am basically begging you, put the thesis in the introductory paragraph. There are some people I have seen who will write their paper and put their thesis at the end. There are some people I have seen who will write their thesis in their intro and botch it and then rewrite it in the conclusion and get the point, but that is a small, small number. We'll go over proper structure, where to put your thesis when we talk about the LEQ and DBQ, but it is very, very important to remember your thesis has to be in your introductory paragraph. It absolutely has to be. Okay, last little piece before we really dive into looking at what a thesis is and what a thesis isn't. First of all, remember, your thesis has to be something that can be argued. Somebody should be able to look at it and go, I disagree, because you're going to try to prove your point in the body paragraphs. So what your thesis is should make me go, I don't think you're right. Even if I'm using insane troll logic. Like, I'll give you an example. The easiest LEQ I have seen in my time teaching this course was in 2018 when they got an LEQ, and you get a choice of LEQs, by the way, but most of my kids wrote on this one because it was that easy. They got an LEQ about how the Columbian Exchange impacted the lives of Native Americans. Several of you watching this right now who only took American 1 and 2, or who only took a push and haven't gotten to that section of this course, could still write me a great essay about how the Columbian Exchange impacted the lives of Native Americans negatively. But you could write a thesis on the positives of the Columbian Exchange. It's an insane person's argument. It's an argument going, okay, yes, several people died, but look at the horses and the variety of diet and all this and gunpowder weaponry. That is still an argument that can be made. Somebody who actually thinks that could actually look at the argument that the Columbian Exchange was a bad thing and go, I disagree with your argument. Okay, so please, please, please keep in mind, somebody has to be able to disagree with your thesis. What I mean by that is your thesis isn't a statement of fact. If your thesis is just the Columbian Exchange impacted the lives of Native Americans. Yes, it did. How? Tell me how. Your thesis has to relate to the prompt. Now, that may be one of those things that you're like, duh, McDowell, that's the stupidest thing you've ever said. A, I've been on dates before. It's nowhere near the stupidest thing I've ever said. B, jump down here. I always keep meaning to move these. For the last 2 years, I've meant to move these points next to each other. Oh well. You have to be in the right place and you have to be in the right time. If you are outside of the geographic location or of the time frame, no points for you, or you might snag the context point. What do I mean by that? The best example I can give you and I know we haven't covered this in our class yet, but just trust me, it works. The best example I can give you is I gave a practice LEQ one time on revolutions. And one of my students wrote an absolutely gorgeous essay on the Russian Revolution of 1917. But the prompt said 1750 to 1900. Their essay fell outside of the prompt, no points. Um, if you're outside of the geographic range, remember, this ain't a push. You're not all talking about one country anymore. You might get a question on East Asia. If you get a question about East Asia and you write a great essay about Japan, awesome, you got a ton of points. If you get a question about East Asia and you write an essay about India, no points. Okay? That is the difference. It's a huge difference, but it really does matter. Adjectives are your friends. Give me a descriptor. Tell me that a change was massive, or that it was minimal, or that it was greatly positive, or a major negative. Give me something that you can argue. You'll see that in a second on our examples. And then please give me enough specifics to be a thesis. You'll see, again, this is one of those things that's more art than science. Give me enough to be a thesis, but don't go too deep into specifics. If you start telling me, let's say it's the Columbian Exchange prompt, if you start telling me which specific diseases killed which specific people in your thesis, take that stuff to the body. In your thesis, you should just be telling me one of the negative effects of the Columbian Exchange on Native Americans was disease. Bam, you're good. Epidemic disease killed millions of Native Americans. Okay, now go to the body and tell me which diseases and which Native Americans. Do not try to describe your whole essay in a single sentence. You're just giving me a map. You're not giving me directions, if that makes sense. Okay. Please remember this isn't English. Please remember your reader. Even if I'm the person who winds up reading it, it's anonymous. Please remember, I don't know your opinion. Your reader really doesn't know your opinion. And if you get an essay that offers a path of least resistance, feel free to take it. I am not an idiot. I know a lot of you guys don't plan on majoring in history, and that's okay. Um, what's not okay is denying yourself points because you want to choose to die on a certain hill. What I mean by that is this. Fairly obviously, I have shown and told you guys, I don't think very highly of the Mongol Empire. Their positive aspects were entirely incidental. Their negative aspects were myriad, mostly in the form of murder and also in the form of accidentally spreading the Black Plague. If I get a prompt that tells me, hey, what were the positive impact, or I see that I can write an easier essay on the positives of the Mongols, guys, I'm going for that. Not only should you be able to see both sides of an argument just in general, but if it's an easier route to write, take it. You've only got 40 minutes to write it or 45 minutes to write it if it's a DBQ. And by the way, this bullet, the second bullet, really applies to the DBQ. If you get a whole bunch of documents that are leading you in one direction, I recommend taking that direction. You don't have to agree with it in your personal life because how you write your AP essay doesn't determine how you're going to vote. It doesn't determine how you're going to live your life. It determines whether or not you get college credit, and if you're not going to major in history, you should be going for that. I'm going to hold your theses to a higher standard, especially if you didn't take a push. Prepare yourself to read, this is a weak thesis, or this thesis needs work from me. Prepare to read that a lot, and do not read it as an insult. Guys, your thesis has to be strong, and I am going to get you to write strong theses. They're the bedrock of your papers. Your theses cannot be bad, because if your thesis is bad, then your whole essay is trying to build a house on sand. Do not try to make your thesis perfect. I will show you some extremely well-written theses over the course of the next, 27? Exams are a little earlier, called 20 weeks. You are not expected to write professional historian theses. You're not professional historians. You have 40 minutes, not months. Okay? Your thesis is graded accordingly. Your paper is a rough draft. Once you've written your thesis should not be, oh, I wrote that. Oh, no, no, no. Oh, I wrote that. No, 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 no. Oh, I wrote that. No, once you've decided your thesis in the paper, dive into it. Fight for that thesis. Here's a prompt and some examples. Develop an argument that evaluates the extent to which trade altered religious traditions in Afro-Eurasia during the time period 1200 to 1450. Basically, you're looking at, hey, here's some stuff we talked about in both Unit 1 and Unit 2. So this applies to both. Here we go. Between 1200 and 1450, trade changed religious traditions throughout Afro-Eurasia. Not a prompt, or excuse me, not a thesis. That's just rewording the prompt. Here's a weak one. Blah de blah, trade changed religious traditions in Afro-Eurasia by introducing new faiths to new areas. Wow, that was worse than usual. And changing existing religious customs. That is not a strong thesis because it doesn't tell me where, it doesn't tell me what faiths, it doesn't tell me what changed, but it does tell me, hey, paragraph 1's going to look like this. Hey, paragraph 2 is going to look like this. That's a thesis. Not super strong. I'm still going to write some little snarky commentary, but it still gets the point. Trade minimally changed religion. This is a denialist stance. This is saying that trade didn't really produce a whole lot of change during this time period. And you know what? It's a thesis. It's not super strong because it still only makes two kind of vague arguments, but it works. Lastly, trade greatly altered the religious landscape by introducing Islam to West Africa, East Africa, and Indonesia, and syncretizing the religion in each of those regions. Sorry, my head is blocking some of this, but that's a good thesis. It tells me what religion, and it tells me where, and it tells me, hey, I'm going to talk about Islam in these particular places in one location, and syncretization of Islam in the next. That's a solid thesis. Write them like that. If you took a push and are used to the model of, it's the John Irish model, while something, and then, A and B, however, C, cool. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, or if you didn't really like your grade on the A-Push exam, then let's try writing our theses like these. We'll work our way up to however statements a little bit later in the class, yeah? You can practice either of these. I'm going to just go through them in like a couple of seconds just to give you an idea of a practice prompt that you could, if you want to write a thesis based on this one or the next one and send an email to me about them, cool. If you don't want to do that, that is also fine. So here's your practice prompt. Develop an argument which evaluates the most superior flavor of ice cream. Again, if you want to tell me it's chocolate, write your thesis on why chocolate's the best. If you want to tell me it's strawberry, write your thesis on that. If you want to tell me it's pistachio, you're actually correct. No. But look at it like that. It's all opinion based. Here's a less fun actual prompt that would ask you to, and by the way, when you get these prompts, the top bit is just going to be a statement of fact giving you an idea of the historical time period and location. You are actually expected to respond to this bit here. Please only respond to the last part of the prompt, the part that starts with develop an argument. So develop an argument which evaluates the extent to which the Mongols changed the economic environment of Afro-Eurasia. You could say they changed it a lot because A, B, C. You could say, well, they didn't really change it a whole bunch because A, B. You could say they changed it a lot because A and B, but here's how C stayed the same, and all of those work as theses. Thank you guys for being flexible and doing a remote lesson here. That is all I've got for the day. Have a great one. I will see you all on either Monday or Thursday if you're in fourth and fifth period because of election day. Have a great one. Do something nice for somebody today or this weekend. Bye.